Hello everyone! Today's video is going to be similar to last week's, where I showed some recent updates I made on the 70 Chevelle and did some driving. Today I've got an older project from last year, which is this Monogram 85 Ford Mustang SVO body sitting on top of an early FFR SC1 chassis. It's been a while since I've driven, worked on, or made a video featuring this car, so I thought I'd do another sort of update and driving video similar to last week. I've done quite a bit of driving with this car, some of which I've showcased in previous videos. I've been very happy with how the car drives, though there are still some things I want to change and experiment with, such as the suspension. The appearance of the car turned out looking pretty nice. Although the paint isn't perfect and the body does have some scrapes and wear, I really like how the car looks overall. One thing that I thought this car was missing, however, was a set of tailpipes, which I'll be adding later on in this video. Under the hood you can see the large RF130 motor and MSO1 front suspension and steering assembly. An MA10 axle with 3-link suspension is in the rear. Before doing any driving, I first wanted to make some changes to the front suspension. Moving over to the workbench, you can get a good look at the ride height, which I think is just about perfect as far as appearance goes. I'll be swapping the firm springs in the front with 0.2mm springs to soften the front suspension. First though, I already had the tailpipes I'll be installing printed, which is what you see here. They look great, though it's clear I need to add some material between each tailpipe and the chassis so they sit low enough to not get in the way of the rear bumper. Before installing them, I wanted to apply some paint. I used some Rust-Oleum metallic finish chrome paint, hoping to get a nice shiny chrome finish, which I was able to do successfully. I did get just a tiny bit of paint cracking on one piece, but I was applying the coats relatively thick to ensure the paint was completely smooth, so that could have been the cause. I was really impressed with how this paint turned out, and will certainly be using it more. I wanted to get those parts painted right away to give them time to dry while working on the chassis. Like I had just mentioned previously, I felt the springs on the front were too firm, and I wanted to install some softer ones. These MSO1 assemblies tend to be a little harder to work on and make the suspension move smoothly compared to the MCO1 assemblies. Changing the springs does require some disassembly. I first removed the wheels and then removed the entire front suspension assembly from the chassis for better access. I then removed the lower control arm and steering knuckle so I could change the spring. I did a few quick tests to see how the suspension feels and gradually cut the spring to the length I wanted. The current lower control arm support piece I'm using, which prevents the lower control arms from dropping too low, is not allowing enough suspension travel. To allow for some adjustability, I used a piece of foam that I sandwiched in between the base and the lower control arm support. I tightened the screws until there was the amount of travel that I wanted. At this point, it appeared the weight of the chassis was too much for the springs to push up. However, before making any changes to the springs, I first used a 1.5mm drill bit to ensure the strut was clear of any debris and was the exact diameter it needs to be for the metal rod to slide up and down smoothly. I had a feeling that the issue I encountered was caused by at least one of the rods having too much friction rather than needing to beef up the springs. Sure enough, that was all it took to get the suspension to rebound and move smoothly. I wanted to experiment with adding a little more weight to the car. Currently, it was right around 5.5 ounces, so I took it up to about 6 with some lead weights. I'll be playing around more with weight and weight distribution as time goes on. At this point, the tailpipes were pretty much dry. Handling them did leave a few tiny marks, but no big deal. As I said before, I'll need to have some material between the tailpipes and the chassis so they sit low enough. To do this, I used some small pieces of styrene. So they don't stand out, I painted them flat black. While the black paint dried, I wanted to address the issue of the hood moving around while driving. The hood stays in place pretty well on its own, but I wanted to add a couple magnets to the front of the car to keep it solid. All I did was use a total of 4 magnets that fit perfectly in between the body and the hood. 2 magnets were glued to the body and 2 to the hood. With these magnets attached, it's now solidly secured to the body, but can still be opened. By this time, the paint had dried and I could glue the tailpipes. I also painted this upper section of each flat black rather than leaving it chrome. Like I've said, I really like the look of the chrome paint and the detail that these pieces add. Overall, I really like the way this car looks, and I was eager to get outside and do some driving, so that's what I did next. I didn't go all out with an autocross course like I did with the Chevelle, instead just making a few islands to weave between. The main reason for this is that this car is way faster than the Chevelle and lacks the smoothness at lower speeds. This would not do as well going around a bunch of tight corners and through narrow gates. Just like I said when I was driving the car previously, the RF130CH motor is very fast, almost too fast for what I like. I really can't give it more than a quarter throttle in a super small area like this. This car would be a lot more fun on a larger track. It drives very smooth, and the silicone tires grip the concrete like magnets. One thing I do prefer with this car is that it coasts more than the cars with N20 motor and gearbox assemblies, which tend to decelerate pretty quickly after releasing the throttle. Aside from softening up the rear suspension and maybe moving some weight up to the top of the body to give it some more body roll, there really isn't anything more I'd like to do as far as the performance. Although I do like the wheel design that I'm using on this car currently, I wanted to design and print some new wheels. These wheels that I'm designing here aren't based on anything too specific, it's mostly just based on an idea I had for a simple 5-spoke wheel. It's pretty much the same process I've used to design many other wheels on this channel, but I didn't use any reference image. The software I'm using here is Autodesk Fusion 360. After the design was completed, I printed and sanded a set of the wheels. I then painted them using more of the chrome paint, which once again turned out looking great. I also painted a set of brake rotors using Model Master's steel enamel. I glued the brake rotors to the wheels and then mounted the wheels to the car. The new wheels turned out looking great on this car. I'll be sure to post the STL file on Patreon for any members there to print themselves. We'll also be offering these on our store as well. That's all for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.